So it looks like we have a small group today with Vlad and Misha, and Tony looked like he was trying to connect but kept getting booted out.
It must have been the effect of the American conspiracy.
I think so.
It may have been, yes. I'm going to go ahead and put President Lincoln back up. We had started to talk about him last week. Vlad, do you want to help us remember what we talked about last week? What do you remember were our themes in talking about President Lincoln?
Yeah. We're talking about President Lincoln, about Gettysburg battle, about Gettysburg Address, and the role of Lincoln in these events.
And do you remember the year that all this occurred at Gettysburg, Vlad? Both the battle and the address?
It was 18th century.
I'll help you a little bit. 1863.
1863. Yeah.
And the battle was actually in July.
Yeah.
And then President Lincoln comes to Gettysburg, and Gettysburg is probably about 150 miles from Washington, D.C., I think. And he rides a train, and he arrives in Gettysburg, and Vlad, you just said, he had a role in Gettysburg. What was his role?
Do you mean role of address?
Yeah, why was he there? What was the event? So he came in November of 1863. So he comes, many months after the battle. Why did he come there? He gave the address, but why was the event there? Do you remember? And in fact, I will give you a hint with a picture. If you look at the picture address site, what was he there to help consecrate?
Gettysburg is a battlefield, and a lot of people was killed over there.
Yeah, precisely. So many thousand, probably 50,000 or so, were killed or injured. So this huge number were killed or injured. And so what did we have as a result that had to be consecrated? What do we call that in English? Kladbische in Russian, right?
Yeah.
In English, that would be a cemetery. So you were correct. It is a battlefield. But it's also, because of so many people who were killed, as you mentioned, it was a cemetery, and they were there to, Professor Lero helped us use the proper verb last week. They were there to consecrate the cemetery, to give it official and religious blessing as a cemetery, as a place where many people died and many people were buried. Misha, have you did you have a chance to listen to the Gettysburg Address in the recordings that we had on the
Sorry, I've seen the job but did not make it. I have a very difficult month of February. I work hard and I hand the last exams. I really miss you. Can I have today? Will only listen, please.
Ah, okay. Well, we will let you help us when the time is right. Tony, are you with us? I don't think you have a microphone yet, do you?
And Tony, can you hear us? If you can, would you please write in the chat so we know you're connected?
He can't hear us either, so he may be having some difficulties. So Vlad, you may get to be our expert for a few minutes.
Star.
A star, yes. Yes,
Star is different from meteorite.
Vlad, what do you know about the Gettysburg Address? Was it a long speech or a short speech?
It took about 2 minutes for Lincoln for all speech in that day. So it's gonna be short speech.
Yeah, very short. If I'm not mistaken, I think it was 272 words. So hardly even, one typed page. And we think it took about 2 or 3 minutes. And there was another speaker ahead of him, a very famous speaker who went ahead of him, who spoke for 2 hours or more. So there was this very famous speaker and a very long speech. And then at the end, Lincoln stands up and does his speech, but it is very fast. And we do not have a recording of this, but many people believe and talk about Lincoln not being a very, very good public speaker, that his voice was a little higher and that he spoke very fast. And so if you were in the audience, many people said you hardly noticed that his speech had started before his speech ended.
Mm-hmm. I want to make an
Go ahead.
I'd like to make an observation about this photograph. I remember seeing in the film Lincoln that Daniel Day-Lewis, as he was portraying the president, when he gave his second inaugural speech, that he made this gesture with his arms kind of spread at his side, as if the beginning of an embrace. But this particular gesture was the one in this lithograph here was one that Daniel Day-Lewis copied.
Interesting. There's one photograph. While we're talking, I'll see if we can find it. There's no recording. There's only one photograph. And Professor Lero told the story last week that many people believe that Lincoln worked on the speech while he rode on the train. And then the night before, when he is in a house in Gettysburg, he works on the speech. But if I'm not mistaken, all we have is drafts, some notes he took, and there were many people in the audience who were trying to copy down the words exactly. And I'm not sure if this is going to show very well or not. So there are many handwritten copies of the speech that look sort of like this, of people who were in the audience trying to write down or record what Lincoln said. So today, when a president gives a speech, there are, video cameras and audio recorders and hundreds of copies of it. But without those technologies, it's very hard. And many of the documents, many of the people who were in the audience copied it down slightly differently. so there were, in fact, some people who differed as to what the president had actually said. And so it's a very interesting historical question or historical project for historians to work on when they think about what precisely he said. And I'm trying to get a copy of it here so that we can share it. Professor Marston, did you learn this speech when you were a child?
I did.
And what grade did you learn it in?
Oh, I can't tell you that. 3rd or 4th, maybe.
And Professor Lero, did you learn it as well?
Yes, indeed. And but I don't remember. I don't remember.
Oh, I think he froze up at the thought.
I will put a copy of it on the screen here. Is that visible to everyone?
Yeah.
Yes, it's huge.
I keep slipping off. That's the 2nd time today I have slipped off.
Lost you in the middle of whether you had learned the address or not. We can spend just a few minutes looking a little bit at some of these very famous words, and then we'll go to the chapter we were reading. The beginning is probably the best known part of the address, and starts with this very odd phrase that we discussed last week, fourscore and 7 years ago, and we did the math. A score is 20 years. So when Lincoln starts by saying fourscore and 7 years ago, he's talking about 87 years ago, the founding of the United States. Vlad, do you want to do a little bit of reading for us? Do you want to read the first paragraph?
Yeah. Sorry, did you say that 4 is 80 years?
Fourscore is 80 years, so 407 years would be 87.
It's strange because I heard about that score is a century.
Oh.
Right. Not.
That's wrong. Yeah.
That use may also occur. I've heard that as well, but more common is a score equaling 20 years.
Yeah. Okay.
Why don't you do some reading? Why don't you play President Lincoln, Vlad, and read a little bit for us? 407 years ago.
Okay. 407 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in the great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. We are met on the great battlefield of that war. We have come to the dedicated portion of that field, as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this.
So you're actually halfway through the speech. You said it was a very short speech, and you're exactly correct. So that piece you've just read is about half of it.
Yeah.
And you'll notice the beautiful rhythm, and you got into that rhythm, right? He has longer sentences. He has very poetic words. And in fact, one of the things you can find on the internet are commentators who explain the Gettysburg Address in plain English, because this is very poetic. Testing whether that nation or any other nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. In spoken oral razgovornaya reč, we would never speak like this. But in giving a speech, in giving what we might use the word oratory to describe, speech giving or speech making or beautiful speech, your language is to be that much higher style.
This was written at a time, gentlemen, when oratory was perhaps one of the principal persuasive media. If you wanted to keep someone's attention and to focused on you and what you were saying, you could say it in very lofty language, the kind of language that would force you to think about what was being said. Politicians today don't speak like this. Advertisers who want you to listen to their message don't speak like this. The modern speech, modern text that wants you to pay attention depends as often as not on repetition and repetition and repetition of a particular idea. I don't know, and kind of simplicity, you know, kind of get right to the point. Get to the point.
It's very hard to find really good speech makers today. And you know, oftentimes if you go and you hear a wonderful speech, you may want to share, you know, tell some people about that. So here in Texas, for many years, we had a wonderful speech maker. She was actually the governor of the state of Texas for some years, whose name was Ann Richards. And she was famous for her public speaking ability that many people compared and called oratory, because it was to listen to her give a speech. Maybe you believed her political views and maybe you didn't, but her ability to give a speech was just absolutely magical. Before we leave, I guess we still don't have Tony. Misha, would you like to read a little bit of this speech for us? So we have that last paragraph that begins, but in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. Do you want to read a little bit for us, Misha, starting at the words, the brave men?
Читать, да? Read.
Yeah, so write the sentence that begins, the brave men living and dead.
But in a larger sense, yes?
Yeah.
We cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. There are brave men living and dead who struggled here, have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little not nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for use the living, rather to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who found he have thus far so nobly advanced.
Very nice. Very nice. I'll pick it up for you.
I remember someone pointing out that in his, I think it was in his State of the Union address, that President Obama used the phrase "unfinished work." That this, and someone said that that's clearly a citation to Abraham Lincoln.
That's excellent. I had not heard that. And as Professor Lero has noted, good orators borrow from other good orators. And then just to finish it out, it is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. That we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, and that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from the earth.
One of the people who analyze Tolstoy's writing note that he used this rule of three. He would often say something by saying it three times, and this happens in this short little speech. We cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow. That we here highly resolve, 1, that these dead shall not have died in vain, 2, that this nation shall have a new birth, and that 3, the government of the people. So they're kind of they're often lists of 3 things in this writing.
A figure of speech.
Oh, and
it's a figure of speech, yeah.
And John Kennedy did that quite well.
John Kennedy.
Too. Yeah.
And of course, the last phrase, the government
I remember.
of the people, by the people, and for the people. That's another. That's a very famous phrase.
And Misha, I like your performance, complete with the hand gestures.
That's perfect. Good
that
for
was
you,
perfect. You may have a career in the movies too. Gettysburg is a wonderful historic town. I think Professor Marston let out the secret that when I was young, I actually lived in Gettysburg. So we got to climb all around. We thought it was great fun to go and climb on the monuments and cannons. And we had no idea really what had happened because we were just kids. We knew it was a battlefield, but I don't think we understood the meaning of it. And then every July, in July 1st through 3rd, people came who were called reenactors. And these are people who would dress up in the costumes and the uniforms of the time and reenact parts of the battle almost like a stage play so that we could see it. And so it's really only as an adult that I have been able to learn a bit more about it. Let me see if I can share. There's only one picture of this event that shows Lincoln, and I don't know if you can see that picture or not. This is actually a photo that was taken at Gettysburg and shows Lincoln, interestingly enough, without his hat, his famous hat. This is really the only live record we have of the event itself and him giving it. And in fact, there is some debate. We don't even know precisely where on the battlefield he gave the speech. We think we know, but we are still debating, and that hill that I showed in the other picture called Address Site is where we think the speech may have been given and where some of the earliest graves in Gettysburg are. So then our writer, Sarah Vowell, comes to the site. And this is the chapter. Vlad, did you have a chance to read the chapter?
Chapter, what chapter?
The chapter by Sarah Vowell called What He Said There.
Oh, yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that chapter. Were you able to read it and listen to it at the same time?
I read it and listened 2 times.
And tell me a little bit about it. Tell me about the author. Is she? What did you learn about her in general before we go into the text? Is she young? Is she old? Is she smart? How would you describe her?
To be honest, I saw only her photo on the internet. It's
so you've looked her up.
yeah, just
in English we would say you Googled her, but did you use Google or did you use maybe Rambler or Yandex?
Google.
You used Google. Very nice. So that's become a perfectly good verb in English. You Googled her. And what did you learn about her, Vlad?
I just saw her photo. It is a woman of middle age, about maybe 40 years. And as I know, she's quite popular in United States, because I find nothing about Sarah Google in Russian sources, only English sources. Yeah.
Okay. She is most famous for 2 things. First, she is an author, but she started her life on the radio. And she started on a network of radio stations called NPR, National Public Radio. The closest thing in style to NPR in Russia, not politics necessarily, but style, would probably be Echo Moskvy. A lot of spoken word material, a lot of political and historical and cultural material on the stations, and they are very popular, especially in the larger cities in the United States, and she was a radio commentator for NPR. And then she began to publish books. Now, Vlad, what would you say about her style? Was she formal? Was she informal? How would you describe her writing in general?
I can try to describe in general what I...
Yeah, just in general,
yeah.
Before we... was she, as I said, formal, informal?
Yeah. It seems to me that Sarah Google, as the author, she used different figures of speech in her work. There are simple narration, there is historical evidence and facts. Also, she used metaphors. For example, she compares Lincoln with Jesus. She used colloquial language like dude, good damn fucking, and it sounds very funny and unusual for such kind of text. And I can describe her style like mixed.
Yeah, very mixed. Part of it's sort of formal. Some of it's very informal, very colloquial. Yeah. She uses she uses street language for some of it. She's definitely younger, and if you listen to her voice, that was actually her reading the chapter.
Is it her voice?
That was her voice. That was Sarah Vowell. And, yeah, very much so. Tony, can you hear us? Tony, are you with us? Can you go ahead and speak, or is your microphone not set here? We will get your impressions, Tony, if we can get your microphone turned on here in a moment. We had a wonderful word. Actually, Vlad, I really liked your description. It was a very good analysis. I forgot who used the word last week. It's a wonderful English word, snarky. You mentioned part of this, Vlad. You said she had some humor, some cutting humor. I wish I knew a good Russian word for snarky. I don't think I do. A little snide. Professor Lira and Marston, what would be some other synonyms for snarky?
Sassy.
Yeah, very,
Sassy.
very nice.
Irreverent.
Irreverent, I love that one.
Irreverent.
And part of it, though, as Vlad pointed out, very formal, very descriptive. And then she will dive into an issue and really make you think about it. Let's, go ahead, Joe. Vlad, why don't you try doing a little bit of reading at the beginning? And so the chapter is entitled What He Said Here, I'm sorry, What He Said There. And we analyzed last week that there is Gettysburg. So she is going to be a modern-day commentator coming to Gettysburg. And she's going to look at what she sees around. Who are the Americans? What are they paying attention to? What are they not paying attention to? At this very famous place. And so she has come in the year 2000, 137 years after the event, and they are reenacting the speech, but she gives some commentary on the Americans in general. Do you want to do a little bit of reading, Vlad? There are children playing on a soccer field.
There are children playing soccer on the field at Gettysburg where the Union Army lost their first day's fight. Playing soccer like a bunch of Belgians, and in the middle of football season, no less. Outside of town, there is a billboard for a shopping mall said to be a Gettysburg address for shopping. Standing on the train platform where the Abraham Lincoln disembarked from Washington on November 18, 1863. There is a Confederate soldier reenactor. Which direction south? I asked him, trying to recreate the presidential moment. When the fake Johnny Rep replies that he doesn't know. I
scold him.
Oh, yeah. I scold him. Dude, you're from there.
All right.
Around the corner.
Wonderful. Yeah, so she started off, and exactly as you said, she's really dived in to look at things. So she comes to Gettysburg, and she sees children playing soccer. Why is that odd to her, Misha? If she comes to Gettysburg and she sees Americans playing soccer, why would that be odd to the author, Misha? This, Misha?
Translator soccer.
Yeah, so she comes in and she sees a bunch of Americans playing soccer.
This is football.
Yeah, football in Russian sense. So how popular is soccer in Russia?
Quite popular.
Is that Vlad?
I think it's pretty popular, yeah.
Yeah,
Maybe,
pretty popular in Russia. Is it the most popular sport in Russia, Vlad?
I think the most popular is hockey, from my point of view.
From your point of view, hockey, yeah.
Especially in Omsk.
In Omsk, yeah.
Russian football loser.
So Misha, would you say soccer is very popular in Russia, or hockey is more popular? In Russia, Misha.
In Russia, hockey.
Hockey is more popular. So we're talking to two people from Omsk. I think Vlad has put his finger on it. How popular is soccer in the United States?
Rugby.
Yeah, so in the United States we have, of course, American football.
American football.
And then a whole other series of sports that one might play, but would you say or guess that soccer is less popular in the United States, Misha and Vlad?
Yeah. There's the main popular sport in the United States, the golf, baseball, and football, as I know.
I would probably agree with you. Yeah, those are the sports that get a lot of visibility.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought of golf, and there will also be some regional differences. If you look at Professor Marston's university, for example, in the Midwest, I bet they have a big wrestling team, right? Right, Professor Marston?
No.
Yes. And of course, track is important at Drake.
Track and field, yeah, very much so.
They have a famous site for NCAA competitions now.
So Sarah Vowell makes this snide remark, they're playing soccer like a bunch of Belgians. So here she is at a very famous American place, and she's trying to point out that the sport she sees the kids playing isn't very American. And even worse, it's November, which is the football season. So why aren't these American kids playing football is what she is attempting to point out. And then she looks at a billboard. Vlad, what's a billboard? Where would you see billboards?
Billboard is a commercial.
Yeah, it's a commercial, but where do you see it? It's not a commercial you would see on TV.
Oh, it's near the mall. It's like a big poster.
Yeah, big sign, right?
Yeah,
Oftentimes you see billboards by the highway.
Yeah.
Tell me about billboards in Russia. Do you have a lot of them, or not many of them?
A lot of. If you ride the car, you can see it every 15 foot. I don't know.
15 feet, yeah.
Yeah.
Why is it board? I understand board.
Yeah.
Доска какая-то, a board.
Yeah.
But how about, what about a billboard? Who is Bill? Who is Bill? Who's Bill? Bill. It's not a bill.
So it's not a bill as a person. I suspect it comes from the phrase bill of sale. Yeah, Jan has said it's a single sheet of paper or a bill of sale.
Poster, a bill of sale. You have the expression post no bills. Post no bills. Post no bills. Post no bills.
So in essence, they're big signs that are trying to sell you something or tell you something. And I think next week or very soon, Professor Lira will share some pictures of billboards in the United States. And then she gets to the train station, and she meets a Confederate soldier who she calls Johnny Reb. So remember that we're talking about a civil war. There's a northern army and a southern army. Vlad, you seem to be very up to speed on your Gettysburg details. Was the Confederate Army the North or the South?
South.
It was the South. And one of the nicknames that are used for soldiers from the South were Johnny Reb, Reb based on rebel. And what does she do? She goes up and asks him a question. She wants to see, you know, help find out where she is or what direction to go, and he doesn't even seem to know what direction is south, and he's supposed to be from the South. So she uses that wonderful phrase, "Dude, you're from there." Would you call that very formal speech or very informal speech, Vlad?
Formal.
Not too, the dude part would be not very formal.
Not formal, yeah.
Yeah, not formal. What would be a good Russian equivalent of dude? Many languages have that. It's usually a noun, you know, that describes a male person. In German, you can say Mensch, you know, man, what are you doing? Dude, what are you doing? What would be a good Russian equivalent?
Anton has suggested one in the chat.
I'm looking at that. Yes, exactly. I love Chuvak Druzi. Excellent, excellent. You know, very informal. So you wouldn't, if you were in very formal company, you might not particularly use that sort of speech. And it's very hard to figure out what to say to a woman, because dude doesn't make much sense to a female speaker, although she's talking to Johnny Reb. So
now you're showing your age.
And how am I showing my age?
Because women are now called dudes too.
Dudes? Are they really?
Yeah.
Thanks, dude.
I've been called a dude.
Excellent. I think Russian would probably give us some more. Well, Russian has, you know, you can use phrases like "devushka" and others in a similar situation in Russian. Chuvak, druzi. Misha, do you want to read a little bit? Do you see that paragraph that begins, "It is November 19th, 2000." Do you want to read a little bit, Misha, for us?
Sorry, repeat please.
Yeah, I'm going to get you to do some reading, but start that paragraph that begins, "It is November 19th, 2000.
It is November 2000,
137.
137, yes, 137th anniversary of the cemetery dedication ceremony at which Lincoln delivered a certain speech 47 years ago. Lincoln said, referring to the Declaration of Independence in
1776.
1070. Sorry.
So we would probably say 1776.
1776. Our father brought forth on this continent a new nation conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Always start with the good news.
Very nice. And so that's sort of her little commentary on it, right? So she gives us the first line of the speech, and that's exactly what we just read a few minutes ago, 7 years ago. Lincoln said, referring to the Declaration of Independence. So there's the year of our founding, 1776. And our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation. There's that wonderful rule of three again that Professor Lero talked about. Conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Always start with the good news. You know, just a little sort of peppy commentary here. And then she says, I could say I've come to Gettysburg as a rubbernecking tourist, that I've shown up to force myself to mull over the consequences of a war I never think about. What a wonderful phrase that is, rubbernecking. Let's break those two pieces apart, Vlad. What can you tell me about the phrase rubbernecking?
As I know, it is a man who watching around everything, like very curious.
And yeah, so if you're rubbernecking, you're sort of pulling your neck back around. And where would you likely see this phrase? This phrase seemed a little out of place to me because she's on her feet, you know, she's at a famous place. But where are you more likely to hear the phrase rubbernecking? When you're doing what? It's actually, we tend to see it when we're driving.
When we're driving. Yeah.
So if there's two lanes to a highway, right, they're going both directions, and there's a wreck in one direction, what do the people in the other lane do?
When we parking, for example, very close near the cars.
Yeah, so one of the ways you could do it, you have this notion of looking around. Yeah. You also see it quite often when you're driving. Maybe you see a wreck by the side of the road, a car accident by the side of the road, and you slow down. You are not in the wreck, but you slow down to take a look, right? So you're rubbernecking, and that causes a traffic jam in and of itself. So frequently in the traffic reports, they will say there is slow traffic on Interstate 20 because rubberneckers are slowing down to look at a wreck in the other lane. And that's causing traffic in a lane where the wreck isn't even present. I'm going to put up one more piece of text just so we can begin to think a little bit more about Gettysburg, and then we can talk a little bit. The battle, as I said, happened in July of 1863. Vlad, do you want to do some more reading? Can you see the text on the screen called Text 2?
And I just want to make a comment. This is displaying very large on my screen, and if you don't know, it's possible to change the size of the display, and you do that at the bottom left. Mine shows 160%. And that's because it's fit to the width of my screen, but you can change it so that it's easier to see the whole document. 100% is good. Now we will return to our regular programming.
All right, Vlad, do you want to read a little bit for us? The fighting at Gettysburg.
Yeah. The fighting at Gettysburg took place between July 1st and July 3rd, 1963. The Union, under the command of General George Meade, won, but not at first and not with ease. In the biggest, bloodiest battle ever fought on the United States, soil 51,000 men were killed, wounded, or missing. And interesting enough in the whipping statistics to spend most of the day being driven around the immense battlefield. Interesting enough.
Okay, go ahead. Do you want to do one more? Or I'll help you with some historical background. So July 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, 1863, the Army of the Union is in the north, the Army of the Confederacy comes to the south, and they meet. And this is what's frequently known in the Civil War as the high water mark of the Confederacy. It is as far north as the Southern Army will ever get. This is the turning point in the war. The South had been winning and had won a large number of battles and was really pushing the Union Army to the north. And there's actually a monument in Gettysburg that's known as the high water mark of the Confederacy. That's as far north as the Confederacy ever got. The Northern general was General Meade. The Southern general was General Lee. And they both come to Gettysburg for a very interesting reason. The reason they come to Gettysburg is for shoes. Soldiers need food, they need supplies, they need guns, they need ammunition. But one of the things that the armies were really lacking at this point, 2 years into the war, was shoes. And just down the road from Gettysburg in a town called Hanover, there was a big shoe factory. So both of the armies were thinking that they could take this area and have a battle, and one of the things they could also get out of the battle was fresh new shoes for their soldiers. There's also a very funny story that you don't hear in the history books. Both of the armies arrive in Gettysburg on July 1st, and there isn't too much fighting on July 1st. The big battles are on July 2nd and July 3rd. And one of the reasons that there wasn't any fighting on July 1st is that around Gettysburg there are many orchards. And in particular, there were cherry orchards. And General Lee went out into the orchard and ate some of the cherries and got very sick digestively. And so he spent most of July 1st in the bathroom rather than commanding his army. And that's why there weren't very many battles on July 1st in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. He had eaten the cherries fresh off the trees and got upset with his stomach and digestion. Following Gettysburg, and Joe makes a wonderful pun. Since at the heart of cherries are pits, Joe, do you want to offer some commentary?
Well, you're right. There you go. It's the seed in the middle of a cherry is called a pit. A pit, and a pit is also a hole, especially a hole, small hole, either in the ground. You could say that you have a pitted surface, a pitted glass. It's a small hole. So, and in modern English, colloquial English, I'm not sure why it is, but if something is very, you can say, well, if something is not good, you can say, well, that's the pits. It's the pits. It's the pits, and this lends itself to this pun. It's a good pun.
It's a good pun.
Having this upset stomach, pits.
So,
Yes.
and to be even more graphic, basically General Lee didn't fight on July 1st because he had diarrhea. And you don't read that in any of the history books.
It's the piss.
It's the piss. Well, we will probably leave Gettysburg as a discussion topic for now, and as we go forward, we will continue to think about this topic of history is very interesting. One of the senses that Sarah Vowell talks about is how much Americans are interested in and engaged with history. And she sees a lot of commercialism in Gettysburg, and she sees a lot of things that maybe didn't do proper justice or reverence to the battle. But I have always been very struck by how important history is in the Russian context. We talked about some famous Russian battles last week. Vlad, if we ask you to name a famous Russian battle, what Russian battle would you share with us? What famous battle would you know some details about?
There are so much battles were in Russia.
Do you remember one we talked about last week?
Yeah. Maybe it's going to be one of the World War II battles.
Yeah, maybe one of the World War II battles. Did we talk? I can't remember. Did we talk about the Battle of Stalingrad last week, for example?
Also the medieval one, the name of which I can't pronounce it.
Yeah, I see Tony has put Kulikova in there. Tony, do you have a microphone yet?
Oh, can you hear me now?
Oh, we can hear you now.
Right now? Oh, yeah, that's great. What else I can remember from the Russian history battles? It's, yeah, I'm just Googling it, how to say it in English. Yeah. Battle of the Ice. Yeah, it's 13th century in 1132 between the Russian and the Doric knights. Yeah.
So you've got you've got Kulikova there, right? 1380, fairly far back in history.
Yeah, that was one of the major battles in Russian history and one of the most important. Russia then protected herself from being invaded by the European world and from Catholic world.
Yeah, so Russia has had battles with the Mongols, right? That was Kulikova. You were also talking about some battles to the north. Russia has battled with Sweden, the Swedes, right?
Yes, that's
especially
1701 to 1725. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, especially Tsar Peter had a problem with the Swedes, didn't he? And then Professor Lero has put Borodino on there. Who were the Russians battling with there, Tony?
The French.
And in particular, which French leader?
Napoleon Bonaparte.
Yeah, Napoleon. And we learned, interestingly enough, with another group last week that for some years that war was known as the First Patriotic War, to keep it separate from the Great Patriotic War, which would be World War II.
Yeah, that's exactly so, and we really call it Great Patriotic War because it was the whole folks, the whole people fighting with the one enemy, unlike anything else before.
Very nice, yeah. And then World War II, I think Vlad mentioned that, fighting the Germans. And would you say, Tony, that you or the average Russian knows a lot about World War II?
Knows a lot. I can't really say so about, for example, my generation or previous generation, because it was quite long ago, and we have much veterans left right now, and it's quite easy, I guess.
Now, would the generation that is one older than you, would you say they have knowledge, lots of knowledge about World War II?
Some people do remember, some don't, but I must say that war concerns every family, every people in our country. Too many died. It's just, would be just a shame to forget something like that.
Yeah, so a very good, strong sense of history.
Mm-hmm.
But I liked very much what you said about it being generational. Your generation may think about it differently than the generation that's one above you, one generation older than you. Professor Lero and Marston, how would we categorize Americans in history? Would it be similar, would you say?
Well, I have the I have the impression that not all Americans are students of history or like to study history or even enjoy reading history. We tend, you know,
I think we lost Professor Lero. His point that he started, I think, was a very good one. That Americans don't tend to read or revel in history or spend a lot of time with history. So Sarah Vowell is sort of interesting in that regard, in that she is interested in history and thinks about history. And I think we'll get Professor Lero back here.
Once again, I fell off. That's happened 3 or 4 times today. I think we tend, if you look back at American history, say you look at the time of the Pilgrims and the time of the American Revolution and the time of the American Civil War, that there is, we tend to collapse all of that. Well, that was then. That was a long time ago. Even though there was, between the time of the Pilgrims and the American Revolution was 150 years, and between the American Revolution and the Civil War was almost another 100 years. We're talking about long intervals of time, but we tend to collapse all that. I think we don't realize that there was more time, for example, between the Revolution and the Pilgrims than there was between the Civil War and today.
Someone must be watching the video and it's coming through. I think that Americans don't have much sense of history. I think for me, I noticed that my daughter and I were talking about history the other day, and she was saying it's so boring. She's trying to help her daughter learn about it. Excuse me. And it's somehow not relevant to their lives. So I think when my daughter was younger, in the 80s, already for her the Vietnam War, which was very relevant to me. Sorry, didn't get there. I knew a lot about the Vietnam War, but for her it was in the past already. And so for her, talking about Vietnam might as well have been talking about the Civil War or the Revolutionary War. Having said that, we live in a time when the Civil War is still very present in our culture. My father-in-law was named after a Confederate general, the Confederate general. His name was Robert E. Lee, and then his family name came after that. But so my father-in-law came from a family who was very much connected to the past, the Civil War past from the South. And in the South, the side of the Confederate States or the rebels, you can still hear people say, "The South will rise again."
The South will rise again.
The South will rise again.
In the South, the Civil War is sometimes called the War of Northern Aggression.
And we are almost out of time, but I wanted, Vlad, you made a very interesting comment in the chat. You said everybody wanted to enslave Russia, so throughout all of history there have been a series of military conflicts. Do you want to talk a little bit about that for a minute or so? Are you with us, Vlad?
Hello?
Yeah, Vlad, do you made a comment in the chat about Russia being surrounded by enemies. Could you say a little bit more about that?
I can talk in about a few hours because there's a lot of conflicts. Each century, hundreds, maybe thousands conflicts. So it's very difficult to explain everything.
And would you say that that is a sense that may not be your friends, maybe hostile to Russia? So is that true today?
I don't think so. Maybe today is a more peaceful time. If compare, if compare with the 20th century, it's pretty peaceful. Yeah.
Somewhat more peaceful, yeah. Tony, what do you think? Do you have a sense that all of the countries now around Russia are friends or enemies?
Well, as I have already said in chat, I suppose we can only say that Russia doesn't have any real enemies, well, maybe except for China, because there are too much of them and they want our territory, but that's just a myth. They're expanding inside their country, and that's okay, still. I don't really consider the United States as our enemy, because you are just people like us, in my opinion, in my work, in my view. And sometimes press has press is just make any conflict between us, especially when they are mentioning these kids, orphans, who were adopted by America.
The adoption crisis, right? The adoption issue, right?
Yeah, exactly. I don't think it happens just accidentally. I think they're just making it with purpose, in my opinion, I would say. And I don't really see our NATO neighbors as enemies as well. Yeah. I'm quite liberal about our international connections. Yeah.
Oh, very nice. Well, very good. I think we have made you three gentlemen work very hard today. You got lots of good listening practice, good speaking practice. I think you were doing some reading and listening as well. And that will continue next week on the website. You will see some materials to prepare, and we will continue our discussions. We are also going to ask you to, every week, speak a little bit more, prepare a little bit more, bring materials to share, so much as we take over the screen and share a photo or share a map or share a text. As we go through the semester more and more, we will ask you to do the same thing. So just wanted to give you a quick little heads up there and say thank you for a very good class meeting today, and we will see you all next week. Very good session today.
Thank you, everybody.
I wanted to add that I am writing a blog on the website, and if you look at that, you will maybe find some strategies for learning language better. And also, I'm still hoping that you gentlemen will write comments on role models. We have several people have written comments on role models already, and if you don't want to write a comment on your own role model, please comment on what someone else has written. I have written responses to everyone who has posted, and I will continue to do that. So it's an important part of this course which we have added, and we would like you to get the benefit of reading and writing. So do that. You can do that any time.
And as we have said already, that our meetings and our course are, we bring you exercises, materials, chances to speak and listen and read and write, but you also need to invest time to do that. So even though we only meet on Tuesdays, on all of the other days, the more time you spend reading and listening and writing, as Professor Marston said, the better our sessions on Tuesday will be. So we enjoy reading what you write, and we want to write as well, which gives you reading practice. And the more language and culture that we engage with and think about and talk about, the more your language and culture will develop.
And what I will be writing next on my blog are strategies for listening and strategies for speaking. So look it up and see if you can. I will post it in the next day or two, and I've already posted something there, and you're invited to comment.
One of the skills that I think will get much better is your listening. Many of our students tell us on the first class they listen to us as native speakers, and it's very difficult because we speak quickly, me in particular. But by the third or fourth class, our Russian students say, I'm not having difficulties anymore. My listening gets better. But Professor Marston will provide some strategies to help you maximize that. Well, thank you all for a good class. Молодцы. And we will talk to you next week.
Have a good week. Good night.
Have a good week.
Have a good day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. До свидания.
До свидания. Professors Marston and Lero, I can't remember if I sent an email. I am due to go up to the provost at 10, so I am not sure I'm going to make it back even for the second half of class for our 10 o'clock group.
Okay.
If we just leave the materials up, will that work? I hope.
If we use the same address.
We need to have a separate recording, and so that last week it was entirely separate.
Okay.
I think we had a different.
It's a different address. Yeah. So that won't help us.
I'm going to mail you the pieces right now.
Ooh, I was hoping you'd do that, Pete. That's a big help.
I tried to keep the provost out of my calendar, but he has more power over us than I have.
Yes, I remember you were somewhat, you were pretty good at not mastering that common calendar for a long time.
Pete, have you been? Are you aware of the coordinating board controversy concerning the guy who's the president at UT Austin? What's his name?
Powers.
Powers, yeah, Bill Powers, and how the legislature sort of had Powers Day in effect, saying to the coordinating board, "Keep your hands off me."
Oh, I hadn't heard that second part. I'd heard the first part.